and welcome to the Simplifiers podcast, where we take topics in business and in life and simplify them. Now, friends, if you've been thinking about becoming a small business owner or just jumping off the corporate 9-to-5, this episode is for you. My special guest today is Anna Lundberg, and she's the founder of One Step Outside, where she helps people around the world build businesses and create a lifestyle that allows them an unimagined sense of freedom, flexibility, and fulfillment. Since leaving her corporate job in 2013, she's reimagining what success looks like, and she's passionate about inspiring and supporting others to do the same. So let's simplify getting off the 9-to-5. I'd like to welcome to the Simplifiers podcast today, Anna Lundberg. Hey, Anna.
Hi, Mary. Thanks so much for having me.
It's so great that you're here. And I want to dive into, simplifying how to start a business. Like how do we start to reimagine our success? What's step one for you?
Right, straight in there into the meat of the topic. Well, I think first of all, I guess to answer the question why we even talk about success, because I think some people, question, they say, why aren't you talking about happiness or fulfillment and so on? And I looked at the dictionary definition, which of course we always do in these things when we do a school essay or, a presentation. And the definition of success is actually just the accomplishment of an aim or a purpose. So there's also this idea of fame and fortune and that kind of stereotype, but really it's achieving some kind of goal. So really it's up to you to define what that goal is. And that really is, for me, step one. So I think we've all inherited certain expectations and definitions, and they're often subconscious. We haven't even thought about them. Mm-hmm. And certainly I never did. You're just on this kind of conveyor belt from school, from teachers, parents, TV, society. And actually, when you achieve that so-called success, a lot of us wake up and say, hang on a second, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And that obviously can be quite painful and difficult. So It sounds very simple. Just define what success is for you. But that is ultimately how simple it is. Of course, it takes time and so on. But step one really is to begin to question, hang on, what is success for me?
Well, and I think that's really interesting that you put it that way, because I'm willing to bet people are similar to me. I'll be the very first to admit it, in that you get so caught up in the hamster wheel of life. You're busy, you're going, and you don't actually stop to pause and actually ask these kind of deep soul questions. So you're just going. You're just like in the wheel. You're going. You don't question reality. You watch Strictly Come Dancing. You just go, right? But like the reality is that when you give yourself permission to slow down and go, hang on, what am I going for? What am I want, in life? Then it changes the compass, right?
Absolutely. And that hamster wheel is so familiar to us all, I think. And to be honest, unfortunately, it can happen even after we've quit. I made that one decision. I thought, ta-da, I've redefined it. I'm doing the magical thing of unicorns and rainbows. Yeah. And of course, you can very quickly sort of get sucked into that hamster wheel again, just in a different kind of setting, in a different direction. Yeah. And I think you made an interesting point there, that actually taking some time off is the best thing you can do. And I'm sure you and many of your listeners will have had that experience when you're on holiday, even a weekend away, but often, vacation, much needed vacation in your stressful work, that is when you begin to think, oh, what if I were a writer? Or, I could travel the world. I could take a year off with my children and go, and all these amazing things. And then unfortunately, for most of us, we just go back to the office, those 3,000 emails come pouring back into our inbox, and we forget all about it. And, we're pretty comfortable. We have our friends and colleagues. We have our lives. And as you say, and somebody said to me once, we can't all be dreamers, Anna, suggesting that this is a luxury, which of course it is to some extent. It is a privilege that we have in our position, I think, in society, but we do have that opportunity. So to the extent that we can, I'd encourage people to ask those big questions as we used to maybe as children. We've just lost sight of that as sort of boring adults.
Yeah, and giving yourself permission to dream and just think a little bit outside the box of what could potentially be, a better reality. So let's talk about the box, right? So somebody's probably listening to this episode right now and they're in a cubicle farm. They're at a big corporate. They've been there for a while. They just feel like they're pushing paper from this side of the desk over to this side of the desk and clocking in and clocking out. If that girl is listening right now, we just want to give you a giant hug, right? Like we've all been there. At what point did you personally decide like enough is enough with your corporate 9-to-5 job and exit stage left?
Yeah, so interestingly for me, there was no massive trigger. So sometimes, people will have either a redundancy or restructuring, or their favorite boss has left, or a personal illness, or someone in
Yeah.
their go, or even a promotion. You get promoted and suddenly you realize, hang on, I don't want to go any further. Looking up in the senior
Yeah.
management, you're like, nope, don't want to go where they are, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it was more a slow burning, sort of wearing me down. And I think, although I was always a bit unintentional with what I was doing, I had thought that I wanted to actually work at the UN, United Nations, in NGOs, helping children in Africa, and all these wonderful things about changing the world.
Yeah.
And as I say, I ended up in the private sector selling perfume. So although I loved my work, I loved my colleagues, I learned so much, I earned a great salary, it was very easy and comfortable and wonderful. And I certainly never regret it. I'm not the one who hated my job and had to quit, but something happened where I just didn't have that purpose. I wasn't really connected to what I was doing. I didn't feel it was meaningful. And I still don't really know what kind of triggered that decision or really the courage. And I'm impressed that I managed it, because looking back, I'm thinking, what was I doing?
Yeah.
And actually the little step was actually a big step to ask for a sabbatical initially. So I didn't quit. I just asked for some time off, and it happened to work out in the assignments. Every 2 years we'd kind of change role. There was no obvious role for me. So my boss said, yep, sure. And then it was then, again, going back to the point about taking time off, that I was outside of my usual bubble,
Right.
my friends, my circle. And that was when I sort of opened my eyes for a longer period, because 3 months really is, time to do all that soul searching and reading and exploring and talking to people. And halfway through that sabbatical, I actually called up and quit. I knew that if I came back, I would just get sucked in again to that comfort zone, and I wouldn't dare to change it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times when people are in a job that doesn't serve them, we're not saying that all corporate jobs are bad, and we're not also saying that all running a business is good either. But when you're in a position with your work where you're not satisfied, you're not fulfilled, like, what came up for you? Was it just feeling like, gosh, like this is not serving me. This is not bringing me what I want to feel in my life. Was that the case for you, or just feeling something deeper?
Yeah, I think I didn't articulate it very well at the time. And now that I've trained as a coach and I've done so much sort of work on myself and with other people, I can talk about all these things in much more sort of rich language, I suppose. But at the time, I just fundamentally, it felt disconnected. I told everybody who wanted to listen, and myself, I want to work at the UN, but I didn't really do anything about it. I talked about, I want to go traveling, I want to write, and I never did it.
Yeah.
So there was just this disconnect, I think was the word. When I get dramatic, I say it was soul destroying, because it was just, wanting to be somewhere and not doing anything about it is horrible.
Yeah.
One thing is, as you say, for some people, they're happy in their work, or they recognize right now is not the time to move, and that's great. Choose that with intentionality, focus on what you're doing right now, reassess in a few years. But when you're constantly thinking or telling yourself that you kind of want to be somewhere else and you're not doing anything about it, that's what wears you down, I think.
But yeah, because you're in a rut. You're feeling that constant, like, oh, why won't my life change? Because I'm still going into the Monday routine of dreading Mondays and looking forward to Fridays and, numbing myself with reality television or wine or whatever it is, right, to escape, the drudgery of it. In those moments, I imagine people also start to feel hopeless and a little bit of depression as well. Some people could.
And it never will change, because we're not doing anything about it. So in my case, I think I was lucky. I had certain conversations with people who encouraged me and inspired me. And there is a bit of luck. And it's also a bit of, surrounding yourself with encouraging, supportive, interesting people who are outside of your bubble and so on. But absolutely, it is. Unfortunately, I think we don't recognize that burnout until we're there. So many of us are ambitious and hardworking, and we're putting, if you have kids, our kids first, and not to mention the fitness and our holidays and adventures and everything. We're trying to do everything, all of us, men, women, children, even. And that is tough. And unfortunately, yes, it's happened. I've met people, I've worked with people who have not been able to pick up on those signs in time, and they've been forced to leave simply because their bodies and minds have given up.
Yeah. So let's back up a little and talk about those that are listening that are like, right, I'm there. This is me. You don't have to say anything more. I'm ready for a change. How do we begin to reimagine success? What are some simple, practical ways that people can start to do that process in your mind?
Well, I think the first thing, again, is to try to take some time out. And it doesn't have to be, I'm going to take a year to find myself in Bali. In fact, probably don't do that. It can be literally a day away, a weekend, sit in the park one afternoon. Take the time you can take.
Yeah.
And rather a little bit of time here and there, I'd say, than even that massive chunk, because you put a lot of pressure on yourself if you're saying, like, I'm going to do this massive soul searching thing in Bali, which some people do. And then they come back and they're like, actually, it didn't give me what I wanted. So I think the first thing is sort of to get out of your usual bubble. And then a couple of exercises you can do, and again, this will take time, and you want to give it time. So patience is a great skill in this case. You don't want to sort of rush into doing something that may or may not be the right thing for you. But if you're a visual person, I'm sure people have heard of vision boards before. It's a fun exercise. If you've got kids, grab some magazines, scissors, look for images that make you feel alive and inspired and happy, and sort of stick those onto a board. Or if you're a more verbal person like me, you can sort of set a timer and just sit down, ask yourself, what does success mean to me? What are my goals? So those are two concrete exercises. And then I'd only say, not to complicate it too much, but I'd say make sure you're considering everything in the sense that don't just think of work, don't limit yourself to the career domain. Think about everything, your family. If you're single, you want to meet someone. These are hard questions, but they're important. It is what success means for you. Getting fitter, traveling, having fun, all these things. So really try to force yourself to sort of think of everything, take a step back. You want to really go big before you later on go through feasibility and narrow down and so on. But you just want to allow yourself to dream, because I'm sure you haven't done that in so long now. So you want to sort of forget about all these restrictions you have and just go, okay, what if I could do anything I wanted? What could that look like?
Yeah. And I think I want to put a pin on the map of something you just said there, because I think it's really, really important is yes, when you stop and pause, get yourself out of your normal routine and your route and go somewhere that is different. You're changing perspective, but you're allowing your brain also to change how it's thinking, right? So, fixed mindset, closed mindset versus growth mindset, open mindset. When you're in a fixed mindset and you're thinking, this is my drudgery, this is my commute, I'm on the tube, like life is misery, and you're in the bubble, right? It's hard to see like a different reality, because you're like, this is it. I take this job because it pays my bills and it works with the thing, and that's all it is. It really is about pulling yourself out so that you can start to dream. And do you think some people have a hard time giving themselves permission to dream and permission to actually, am I worthy to say, hey, I want to be a travel writer, or I want to, go after some sort of career that's related to my passion? Do you think people have a hard time with that?
I think that's such an interesting point. I think to some extent, the whole idea of the 9 to 5 comes from a very sort of Protestant work ethic, and this kind of Lutheran Max Weber, all this stuff about, you work, you certainly don't change career, you do what your parents did kind of thing, you serve God, and there was no finding your purpose and living your best life and all those wonderful things that, are beginning to grow in our society now. And to be honest, if you go back, I'm no expert on this, but the Romans, the Greeks really favored the arts, philosophy, leisure time. Of course, they had slaves, so let's not forget that. But we have potentially robots in the future, so who knows? Yeah. Maybe we can use those. But absolutely, so there's a fundamental society sort of ethic, I think, around the fact that we're supposed to work hard and so on. And there are these beliefs that we have that work is supposed to be work. It's not supposed to be fun. We can't earn money doing things we love. We can't, creative things, fun things. That's not work. That's not going to be a business.
Just relegated to the weekend. Fun is only here, right? That's a belief.
Absolutely. And, running your own business is inherently risky. Being a freelancer, you've got that feast of famine. You could never earn a stable salary. And all those beliefs, I think, are caught up. And yes, unfortunately, I think all that mixes together into sort of a feeling of guilt and a fear that we can't do it. Why would I be able to? Or why should I, as you said, be worthy of those things? And it's a strange one, because I don't know who's decided that, there's this kind of corporate office job is supposed to be our lot. I don't think that's, necessarily the best way to sort of serve society, even from a purely selfless way. I don't think anyone in the world benefits from me staying stuck in a job that I don't enjoy. So I think, not to sort of dismiss that, because it is a real feeling that we have. But I think there's definitely an opportunity to question that and maybe reframe it in a different way.
And, to build on this real quick, I think it's fascinating because I was just having this conversation yesterday. I feel like, and I'm curious if you see it as well, the way we work as humans is changing right now, fundamentally changing with robots and AI and all of the things that are going to start to replace jobs that were normally done by humans. In the next 20 to 30 years, those jobs are going to disappear and be automated by computers. That sounds very sci-fi and all of that, but I really think that that's where we're headed. And more people are going to come upon this realization of like, well, wow, if my corporate 9 to 5 used to be what my parents, they work at a job and they're there for 30 years and there's a pension and, this is what life is, to, hey, more people are going to have to start businesses. More people are going to have to figure out freelance life or build a business of their own in some way. That's where the world is headed. And so this is not a question of, oh, that's for those people over there. I think the majority of society is going to have to start to think in these ways. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think, as you said, the kind of baby boomer generation, that is what our parents did and knew the reality they had, and that's what they've kind of taught us. And I think, educational systems and work environments and so on are still set up for that. But the reality is we're not going to be able to retire and get a massive pension when we're 65. I think the age now is sort of, they're gradually increasing. I'm sure it'll be like 80, 85.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily something we want to do because, there's much more of this kind of mini vacation, mini sort of retirement along the way. We're all going to be changing careers several times in our lives. We're going to be living, 100 years or so. It's not viable anymore to work in the same, same employer, let alone actually the same career actually isn't even a viable option for most of us. So yeah, you're right. This is not this is for you dreamers out there who want to take some risks and do something crazy. This is actually potentially a safer option for you.
Yeah.
Even now the so-called secure big multinational companies, I have contact with one in particular who unfortunately now is letting people go, restructuring. It's not what it used to be. So our so-called safe, secure, stable salaries are not that anymore. And even if we don't want to quit and we're not ready to do that, building a so fashionable side hustle alongside our work can be a way to diversify and add that additional income stream. So, it's actually exactly as you said, it's something we're going to have to deal with. Better to do it now before our skills become obsolete and suddenly we wake up and actually we'll be older as well, so it'll be harder. And if nothing else, again, it's fun. I'm a fan of learning. I love learning new things, meeting people. You'll have fantastic experiences, whatever happens. So absolutely encourage everybody, even if you don't think, this is something that is on the cards necessarily, or you don't feel entrepreneurial, whatever it is. I think it's definitely something that everyone can consider.
Well, and I think it builds into what you hear a lot nowadays of talking about your personal brand. You as a person, what is you and what is your identity? And not only that, but what is your zone of genius, if you will? The things that you know so well, and you can deliver those gifts and, to the world, either to clients or just by who you are, right? I think it's interesting when you start thinking about yourself as a personal brand. That's a very American thing to say, I know. But, it really starts to change something in your brain to think of like, oh, yeah, these are the skills I bring to the table. This is who I am in this, chapter of my life. And how can that translate into a business, starting my own company?
Yeah, and personal branding, it can feel a bit icky for people at the beginning. I'm not a brand and I don't want to put myself out there and sell myself, especially if you've been an employee. It is very different to then go out and sell your own, services. And this is me and I'm amazing and so on. Of course, there are ways to sort of get around that and so on. But the personal branding, absolutely. And even if you're staying within a career, I've had cases where I've worked with clients and we've had maybe 200-300 applicants for a job. In a couple of those cases, and none of those applicants got the job because in the end, an internal candidate was given it. So you're unlikely to get even the traditional jobs via the traditional means at this time. So that personal branding, connecting with people, creating content, that another icky word like thought leadership, but actually being yourself, putting yourself out there, talking to people, adding value is how you're going to build your career, whether you become an entrepreneur, a freelancer, or stay as an employee. Is valuable again for all of us.
So I think the simple practical tip from what we just said is like thinking about yourself and what strengths you bring to the table, either as an employee or as an entrepreneur, or a budding entrepreneur. Like what are you unequivocally known for? What people talk about you and say, oh my gosh, Mary is the girl that I know to go to for this, this, and this. Anna knows this, this, and this. That's the stuff the cues you want to start asking your friends, your clients, your coworkers, just to start to build that picture about yourself. So let's dive into kind of the first 5 steps. So people that are listening are like, oh, this does sound interesting. Maybe I do want to start my own business. Where do we start? Where's your first step?
Oh, where do you want to start with the business? I mean, I think, again, I have to start with the big picture of defining success. And again, we've talked about sort of the vision board and the exercises and so on. Other things you can look at are your values. It's something that I never did before I got into coaching. But actually, to know that you value independence, freedom, creativity, and so on. That's incredibly important to know. And that's probably why you feel disconnected in a role where you have no autonomy. It's all sort of detail work. You're not able to come up with your own ideas at all. And it's just this big corporate machine. So as fluffy as it sounds to think about your values, and maybe you think like, oh no, I've got to think about, my skills and I've got to earn money and so on. Actually, your values can be a better guide, I think, to the kind of work that you want to do. So I know that I'm sure you'll be keen to go, no, what business should I start? And how am I going to price? And what's my client? But before you get to that big picture, what do you want from your business? What's your personal family situation like? What are these values? And also, what are the logistical criteria for it? I always start with the criteria. So, do you want to be able to work from home all the time? Do you want to travel? And if so, is it internationally? Is it to clients' offices every day? Do you never want to do a commute ever again? Do you think actually you'd be really lonely if you work from home by yourself? So you want to make sure you're out and about with people. Do you want to be in an office? Do you want to be outdoors, indoors? All these things. But again, I'm thinking all the different dimensions, all the aspects of work that you've enjoyed, haven't enjoyed, and what you'd like to do. So big picture success, your personal circumstances, the practical logistics, and also, of course, income. So, the biggest fear for us all is we're not going to earn enough money. I'm certainly not going to force you to quit your job if you feel like you're not going to earn enough. You have to take care of your family, your mortgage, your whatever it is. But it's up to you to find what is enough. So another step is to sit down and really look at your finances. And it may be scary. And again, as an employee, we don't usually take this so seriously. I certainly had no idea about the pension and taxes and so on until I started my own business. But better to find out now. And even if it's not as good as you had hoped, it's still better to know now. You'll feel, I think, reassured that actually, I need to save a bit more or cut down on expenses. And again, right now is not the right time to get started with the business necessarily. And that's important information to have. And again, to set yourself criteria. Okay, I will only quit once I have a steady income of X amount a month, or, I'll only go all into the business once I have 10 clients, whatever it is. So you get to define it, which is great. So no one needs to force you into an uncomfortable position. It's up to you to say exactly what's going to make this viable for you.
Yeah. And for me, I mean, I'm a visual learner. So all the questions that Anna just mentioned, write it down. Like that really helps me. When I write it down on a piece of paper and I start to journal out, well, what are my financial thresholds and what do I really want to look like, working 80% at home or 20% in the office or then it's you're building that picture. And in essence, I think what stops a lot of people from starting a business is they're told by very traditional, mentors and things, right, you need a 50-page business plan. And then they go, oh, I don't know how to even write a business plan, Oscar it. I'm not going to do it. But just simple questions like this starts to build the picture, right? It doesn't have to be super complicated, but mapping out what it is that's really important to you, putting it on paper so you can see it in front of you.
Well, those are all the parameters of the business. So that has to be the first step, because otherwise, you can't get into the business model or who's your ideal client, or do you want to do product or service, et cetera, until you know why are you even bothering to do this? And it's going to be hard work, let's face it. So you want to make sure that the thing that you're creating is, first of all, better than what you have right now, but ultimately, ideally, is creating everything that you want in your life. So, make sure you're clear on what that is before you begin to create something that perhaps will just create that same sort of cage or hamster wheel as you had before.
And that's it. I can tell loads of people, I've done it before in my business. I've been in business for 15 years now. And there was an arc where I had built the most ultimate golden hamster wheel that was beautiful on the outside, but it was like soul sucking at certain points, and that's what we all fall into a trap of. You're like, right, I'm going to do this thing. And you go after it and you're like, oh my God, it's not at all what I want, So you have to really be brave to say, right, from the beginning, let's figure out foundational needs and wants and desires.
And it's a constant evolution, just to say, because, you, first of all, you'll find out what you enjoy, you'll see kind of who comes to you and so on. And it is just an ongoing balancing act. Balance is not something that we get to and again, ta-da, we're all perfectly balanced.
Yes, tick that off the list. Yeah,
exactly. Done. Live in utopia the rest of our lives. So for me, sometimes I find, hang on a second, now I've maybe been enjoying the summer a bit too much and I haven't been focusing so much on the business, or maybe now the last few weeks I've had, book launch, group challenge, group program and so on. Suddenly I'm beginning to get a bit of tension into my shoulders and I'm realizing actually pushing myself too much and I need to take a step back. So, we're all human. It's going to be ups and downs, but checking in now and then to make sure, hang on, is the kind of work I'm doing what I want to be doing? And if not, how can I get closer again to that vision I had of what I wanted to create?
Yeah. And so in your book, you also talk about step 2 being addressing your fears. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, again, sounds very, well, does it sound simple? I don't know, but it's pretty difficult. But it's the big thing that everybody says, it's fear, if we admit it. It's fear of failure, fear of making the wrong choice, making mistakes, looking foolish in front of other people judging us, and so on. And fear of failure, again, comes back to, what is failure to you? So first of all, what is success? And then failure means you haven't achieved that success. If success to you is the big corporate job and the house and the white picket fence and the mortgage and the, the salary and the prestige of that, then that's one thing. If not, though, actually leaving that behind. And, for me, for example, success is more about exploring, adventure, being curious, learning things, trying, not having any regrets and so on. And that puts a totally different spin on what I'm doing. So since I want to learn, actually, there is no such thing as failure, because every kind of thing I do wrong, I'm obviously going to learn from. It's a little bit, happy world. Of course, there are things that can go wrong. But actually, again, if you can reframe, what is the worst case scenario? And who are these people who I'm worried about judging me? Is it people who matter to me? And often people who care about us, our parents, our partners and so on, care, and they want to see us do well. So they might be a bit hesitant at the beginning. They don't quite understand. They're worried about you and your money and so on. But as soon as they see you're passionate and committed and working towards your goals, they'll come on board and they'll support you 100%. So again, it's a little bit of breaking that down. What exactly are you afraid of? Looking at what is the worst case scenario, and then, how can you mitigate that? If that happens, what are you going to do about it? And actually, is it as bad as you think? Or maybe it's terrible, but the likelihood is so ridiculously tiny that actually you can probably disregard it. But again, it's sort of facing it head on, questioning those assumptions you're making.
Yeah. And which leads into number 3 for me personally, is that when I have fears and I just keep them all inside and I bottle it all up, it becomes so much more bigger than it actually is. And step 3 you mentioned is finding your tribe. And so for me, finding people that I can talk to and say, gosh, I'm really scared about blah, 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 blah. And people go, oh, that's not a big deal. You just go this or do that, or this is what's worked for me. And then it helps. So what do you mean by finding your tribe?
This has been such a big one for me. And when I first left, it was the first thing that happened. I went to an event that had a career coach who, to be perfectly honest, was completely forgettable. I don't remember what she talked about. It wasn't very helpful. However, the other people at that event were exactly like me. Yeah. They were, in successful corporate jobs. They were beginning to question. They were afraid. And it was like a ding, I'm not the only person. Yeah. It felt amazing. And then over the years, the number of events, and now I'm, of course, part of so many Facebook groups and adventure groups and friendship groups and masterminds and all sorts of things. And suddenly I've gone from, oh my gosh, this is never going to happen. How could I do this? What am I thinking? To everybody around me is doing this.
Yes.
I'm doing it. It's totally the reality. And suddenly, actually, none of us could imagine being in a full-time job. And that becomes the strange thing that nobody really does and I'm afraid of and so on. So it's just been turned completely upside down. So for me, yeah, it's an online or offline group. It could be friends and family, to be perfectly honest. Not to say that you should, completely ignore all your sort of existing circle, but it's probably going to be new people just because you've been in this particular environment, and it can help actually to meet people who you don't know. It lets you sort of start from scratch and reinvent yourself in a way while you're experimenting and finding out and so on. So finding people who are doing what you want to be doing, who'll encourage you and go, oh, wow, that's so cool, rather than what on earth are you thinking? That's never going to work kind of thing. Finding the kind of yes people rather than the no, that's never going to work people is invaluable when building a business.
I could really see that totally. Like the idea of finding like-minded people who are on the same journey as you so that you can kind of have somebody to just sort of, bounce ideas off of, but also, somebody that's going to lift you up. And I also think that's really interesting. You should say maybe it is new people, because I love my partner. I love my friends, but sometimes they're looking at the Mary of 15 years ago and thinking, well, she couldn't do that. That's not possible. And the reality is, 15 years ago, Mary couldn't. But, the Mary of now, with the new information she has and the new things that she can do, can. So new people don't come with that lens of like, oh, that she could never do that. It's a whole new vibe, right?
Absolutely. Love that. New Mary. She can do anything.
Yeah. So what about confidence? Talk to us about that. Step 4.
Well, it's an important part of it. And I think part of it actually is a little bit of swallowing your ego and being humble. We have a successful track record of results in our corporate careers. I work with smart, competent, strong people, independent like me, people who don't want to ask for help. And it's a very comfortable place to be. We're head of whatever in our teams. We're known, as you said, for certain things. And letting go of that, I can't tell you actually, how difficult it is for your identity. First, when you go out to conferences and, I have clients who say, I start saying I'm a marketing. Oh, no, I'm starting my business. I'm like, and a lot of us are also doing lots of different things, Maybe you practice your elevator pitch, but certainly at the beginning, it's not very clear and you don't have a lot of results yet. And it's hard because although there are lots of transferable skills, you have your strengths, you have your networks, there are so many things you can build on. There is going to be a bit of a dip in your confidence. And that's sort of natural. But again, part of the answer is, as you were saying, in terms of mapping out your skills and strengths, that's going to be sort of a boost. I wouldn't go for, expensive formal courses. Some people tend to latch onto, I've got to do an MBA or this formal certification. That may be the answer, but not necessarily. You don't have to invest in that. I mean, this sort of fancy high flyer CV is no longer as important when you're running your own business. And the other thing is confidence comes from action. So as you said, old Mary wasn't even aware of these different things existing. I certainly didn't know podcasts existed a few years ago. I couldn't have imagined myself writing books and being interviewed on podcasts and so on. So it's little steps. I started a blog, and then I might tentatively send out some articles for people to do, and then I might put this out, and I did a little ebook, and that's now 5 years later, and look how far I've come kind of thing. So it's taking little steps. Having the big vision in mind, but still just focusing on right now, a little bit outside your comfort zone, and that's going to move you forwards. And before you know it, you will have transformed your life.
Yeah. And I think that that's so true, because I was in a focus group last week with some very amazing women business owners in my city. And one gal said, oh, gosh, I don't really like to be that person that puts myself out there. I don't like to be in the spotlight, for my own company. I thought, all it is repetition. It's very scary to do something for the very first time, like a Facebook Live video or a podcast interview or even writing a book, I'm sure. The first time you're just like, oh, I don't know how to do this. But it's repetition. It's doing the work every single day, flubbing it up in the beginning and then getting better and better and better. And that's where you build confidence, right?
Yeah, and it's not going to go well the first time. You do a webinar and people won't turn up. You put something out there, people don't buy. The first time I actually came up on my Facebook memories today. It was 2 years ago. I did my first Facebook Live. I hated doing video, and I'm going to do a daily challenge. I was at IKEA for some reason, and I did this hi, it's Hannah. So bad. But 2 years later, now I'm doing a weekly live. I'm doing daily lives. I'm doing LinkedIn videos. I'm I'm sure people can criticize my style and so on, but at least I'm being myself. I'm feeling natural and I love it.
That's it.
So again, it is just day after day, week after week. And suddenly, things over that time will have evolved and you'll be surprised how far you've come.
Yeah. So bottom line, just do it. Just do the thing, push yourself out there and, take action.
Do the thing.
Yes. Now, the fifth step is all about goals, setting goals. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So when I first started sort of coaching things, I was all about goals and pushing and so on and having, setting the right goals and meaningful goals. And I still think that's really important, but I have to temper it a little bit because, again, I found that the risk is that we, as these self-motivated, ambitious, driven people, push ourselves too far. And I think there's also an element of patience and self-compassion and kindness and, being a little bit sort of gentle with ourselves. Having said that, it is so motivating to have a goal. With my book, it's been sitting on my computer for like a year or more. And finally this summer, I was like, nope, 3 months, it's going out on my birthday, boom, told everybody. And of course, I worked towards that deadline. If I hadn't done that, it would still be sitting on my computer. Earlier this year, I wanted to launch my group program, book and podcast. Realized I couldn't do all three in one go, but actually spreading them out over the year was feasible. So, it's thinking about what is actually going to move the needle for you, what's going to be meaningful for you. Coming to the end of the year, perhaps you don't have a lot of time, but what's the one thing that you would feel amazing if you got to the end of the year and got, I've done this, great start for the next year, for example. And again, it's a mix of, long-term, maybe not so realistic goals with some shorter term, more feasible goals, just to make sure you can also sort of achieve some things. I wrote, when I was traveling my sabbatical, I wrote a bucket list of 100 things I wanted to do before I died. And I've achieved 2 this year. So one was getting my sailing license, which I loved doing. And the other one was just going up to this Viking museum in York. And I did that this past weekend with my sister.
Yeah.
And so some things can be totally, feasible. You just don't end up doing it, right? So just, I'm going to do that and then actually make it happen. And then others are going to take longer. Publishing a book, launching a podcast, those types of things will take longer. But it's so fulfilling to work towards that, to learn along the way, and then to achieve it, to hold your book in your hand, to have that podcast out there or whatever it is. So setting goals with deadlines, and bringing it back to specifically, maybe if you're starting the journey, if you're right at the beginning, set yourself a goal also for making some kind of decision. So give yourself 3 months to explore. That's a goal as well. By 3 months, actually, I'm going to decide, what's my next step? What am I going to do? Or by 1 year from now, I want to make sure that I've left, or whatever it is that feels right for you. But set some kind of goal, because otherwise another year will pass and nothing would have changed.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. Even if you feel like you're not ready, just put a date in the calendar and say, I'm going to do this thing by this date, end all be all. I mean, when we moved our whole family and my business from the US to the UK, moving everything across the planet, at the end of the day, what actually worked for me was we said, right, we're buying the plane tickets. There is no, backing out at this point. Once we had that date set, we're like, all right, we better get to work, because if you don't, you say, oh, one day I will move, halfway across the planet. One day will never come. So you have to set a date and work towards it. Yeah. So is everyone built to be a successful entrepreneur in your opinion, or not? Can everyone own their own business?
It's such a good question. I'm not built to be a successful entrepreneur is what I'd say. So I think, I never considered it before. Even when I quit my job, I wasn't like, right, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. So again, it's happened very organically. I don't think there's a certain DNA. We think of entrepreneurs being these risk takers and amazing dreamers and all these things. The Steve Jobs, Richard Branson kind of massive big picture. Yeah. And I think entrepreneurs, and again, some people don't even relate to that term, if you're a freelancer, small business owner, consultant, coach, whatever you want to call yourself, ultimately you sort of are an entrepreneur. That's what we're including in there. So the answer is, I guess, I don't think there's a magical sort of type of person who can be a business owner. Having said that, there are certain traits that, either are naturally easier for you or that you could potentially develop. And one of them has to be being incredibly self-motivated, because however much you have a tribe or a coach or a program, this is you, it's your business.
Yep.
You can have a co-founder or a team, whatever it is, but ultimately it's going to be down to you. So that's something to consider. My boyfriend often says, I can't believe that you get so much work done at home. If I was at home, I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's not true, but some people perhaps just need that external setting and someone telling them what to do or having that framework, and that's absolutely fine. But just to bear in mind that this is going to be down to you. So I tell my clients as well, I can help you so much, but ultimately this is down to you, and you have to own your decisions. You're creating your business and your life. Another one is persistence. And I think the number one reason why people give up too soon, or give up in fact, is that the number one reason why a business fails is that they give up too soon.
Yeah.
So it's easy to say that, if I just gone a bit longer then, but I couldn't, I needed the money and so on. But the reality is, again, it's going to fail at the beginning. You need time to build an audience. You need time to find the message that resonates with people. It is going to take time. And actually, just, again, swallowing your ego, letting that happen, and just keep going, keep getting back up again, do another webinar, launch another program, and then it will, you'll need to pivot, you'll need to evolve in all these things, but ultimately it's about just keep going forwards.
Yeah, it's so true. Keep going is a mantra that I have in my own life. And I think it is, you just need that moment to remember just one step in front of the other. It can seem so overwhelming and big and scary. I'll put a link in the show notes, because there's this amazing Instagram feed where that's all they do is they have different artists create little pictures or illustrations that just simply say, keep going. And it just pops up in your Instagram feed every now and then. You're like, oh yeah, thanks, reminder, keep going.
I'm going to follow them, yeah.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes for that as well. So you said self-motivation, persistence. Any other traits that you think people need to be a good business owner or successful?
Yeah, so I think ironically, and I mentioned it a little bit there, humility. So you think you need to be this big ego and, you're the personal brand and risk taker and all these things. And actually, no, because again, you're going to fail. You need to ask for help. You need to surround yourself with people who know better than you. You need to ask questions. And so I think humility, ironically, is a key part of it. You don't want to just swan around and do all the these are my business cards and I'm a founder of the blah, blah, blah. It's all about the stuff that happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It's doing the work every day, showing up, all the unsexy stuff. That's what's going to get you success. So I think that's something I'd add, the humility.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I also feel like a bit of grit as well, which goes into persistence. Having a bit of grit, because it's hard, it's scary. And, people are going to go, well, that's a dumb idea, Mary. So, and they're going to say that in loving ways, sometimes not so loving ways, and other times just having that ability to kind of let some feedback. People love to give you feedback. Fall off your back and not take it so personally. Because I think sometimes we think, oh my God, this is my business. This is my identity. This is my baby. And, I think having a little bit of grit to know when times do get tough, and they do every now and again. It's like you said, not all ice cream sundaes and unicorns running businesses, but to have a bit of grit to kind of pressure through those harder times. Would you agree?
Yeah, and that made me think of resiliency, which is another sort of trendy word, I think, now, but so important to be able to bounce back. And the not taking things personally, it reminds me, I'm sure you've heard of a book called The Four Agreements, and one of them is don't take things personally. And for me, what resonated was it's not just the negative things, but also the positive that you shouldn't take personally. So the success or failure of my group program or book or whatever is not a reflection on me as a human being. So yes, I've created it. I've put a lot of emotional energy and time into it. But that doesn't mean these are things that are happening externally to me. It's never about me. If a client doesn't want to buy from me, it's not because, I'm a terrible person. It's just not the right fit or, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And likewise, the good things, the fact that someone tells me, well, your book is amazing, you're such a great coach, doesn't actually or shouldn't really affect me either. It's lovely to hear, but their compliment doesn't necessarily add value to me as a human being. It can be a nice thing to collect, and of course it gives me a boost, but I think that's why we need to find that kind of internal strength and belief. And as you said, the grit is sort of part of that as well, but not relying on external validation, whether positive or then also negative, is really important. It's
so easier said than done, but I would say to build on that, you're absolutely right. It comes with repetition. It comes with daily practice and remembering that your identity is so much bigger than just your business. And I think that's sometimes really, really hard. I mean, just like yourself, your website is, AnnaLundberg.com, right? Like it's hard to know how to pull yourself out of the thing that has your name on it, right?
Yeah, and to be honest, in particular, and maybe for you too, a lot of us, are doing things that we're passionate about. Coaching and this kind of thing. Yeah. It's very blurred, the lines. I'm at dinner and somebody talks about maybe wanting to leave their job and they've heard about my book. Of course, we're going to talk about that. Yeah. I love it and I want to help people, but it is hard then to set the boundaries. Compared to, again, my boyfriend comes home from work and he doesn't want to talk shop, as he calls it. He just wants to enjoy himself. So those lines are a bit blurred and that can make it quite difficult.
Yeah. So what are maybe a couple of mistakes you've seen? I mean, in writing your book, you've got to interview quite a few people around the world. I mean, what are some mistakes you see people making and that you would encourage people to avoid when they're leaving their corporate 9-to-5?
Yeah, I think it's to some extent sort of the opposite of what we've been talking about in terms of things that you should do. But one is narrowing down your options too soon, because I think because the only thing we've ever known is this particular corporate job. When I first left, I actually did marketing consulting. So I'd been doing marketing, digital marketing. I did digital marketing consulting. Now, it was a massive step in the right direction. I actually earned more money than I did in my as an employee, which was unusual, I think, for an immediate sort of step out. I was able to travel between contracts. I was working with interesting clients and so on, but ultimately it was the same work. And again, I wasn't really aware of coaching. I wanted to be a writer, but what on earth did that mean and how do I even go about that and so on? So that was quite far removed.
Yeah.
So I think, not to say, and again, I don't regret this, and I think it's important to take those small steps in the right direction and then gradually getting closer. You can't go from, one extreme to the next. It is going to take time, but just bear in mind that bigger vision that actually this is one stepping stone. It's not the ultimate destination. I think that's one thing. And connected to that, rushing into action, again, investing in the MBA, signing up, buying the whatever it is, website, fancy business cards before you actually have done that exercise of what do I want from my business? Yeah. What are the parameters for the family and so on?
Yeah, for sure. And I can 100% agree with all of those things. You also mentioned taking no action at all. So that's the absolute opposite of rushing into things. But the people that go, "Ooh, I'll wait next month. I'll do it next year."
It's that one. And also, unfortunately, I think one of the big reasons why we don't do anything is because we don't know what we want to do instead. So we know they're not this, but we haven't yet worked out what we want to do. And I think that's incredibly important to take that time to explore, but it can become a reason not to do anything. So I don't know what my one business idea is. I want to do so many things. I can't possibly decide. And we get into that analysis paralysis. I think we're using our rational brains doing pros and cons. We're just never going to take action. So at some point, you need to sort of listen to your intuition a little bit. You need to take maybe more of an emotional decision. And then, clarity also comes from action. So again, taking those little steps and you'll find out, oh, this was great, but that wasn't quite right. And then you continue adding, taking away and evolving and so on. So yeah, definitely. If you find that, you've been doing plan after plan and that 50-page business plan or, drawing things on your whiteboard or making notes and just not doing anything, now is the time to take some kind of action, anything, just to get yourself out of that funk.
Yeah. And when you mentioned in your book, like focusing on the wrong things, what do you mean by that? What are the wrong things in your mind?
Well, yeah, that's a subtle thing, I guess, and it's hard to work that out yourself. I think some people, again, we think we need to struggle through it ourselves and we're going to do it and we hustle, we're busy, and yet actually nothing's happening. We tend to be internally focused. So I've definitely done this. We rewrite the copy on our websites 300 times. We design the perfect logo and business cards. Yes. Again, we invest money in things that aren't necessarily actually critical to the business going forwards, where actually what we need to be doing is going out there, building relationships, telling people what we do, actually asking people to buy from us. There's this external world that has to happen, and building our audience, which is going to take weeks, months, years. So sometimes I think we're a little bit too internally focused in that analysis paralysis, doing all this stuff. I need to have the website perfect before I put it out there. And we forget that actually nothing's going to happen. No one's going to buy from us. This is not going to evolve and grow until we actually put something out there, minimum viable product, as we call it, and then you can actually add to that and see people give you feedback and you can make it better and so on. But you have to get out there and start talking to people.
and understand what is their major pain points, and if that is something that jives with your strengths and what you bring to the table. Like, can you solve their pain points through your products and services, through your new business? So we've been talking a lot about your book, and I should mention what the book is called. It's called Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5, and it's stories from people who've done it and how you can too. So you guys can click a link in the show notes to be able to access it, or if you're listening on the go right now, the website is Leaving the Corporate 9 to 5, the number 9 and the number 5, leavingthecorporate9to5.com. And her book is available globally on Amazon in paperback as well as on the Kindle there as well. So I just want to remind everybody about places where you can find Anna online. Her website is onestepoutside.com, and you've got a Facebook group as well. Is that where people can connect with you most, is on Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm on all the channels, of course, as everyone is.
Yeah.
One Step Outside is the brand name, so I've got the page. But the group has really, this year, I've been stepping things up. I'm in there every week with a live. It's where you can find that tribe. You can chat to all those like-minded people, get the support, share your wins, and, of course, ask any questions as well. So definitely the One Step Outside Facebook group is a great place to start.
Brilliant. So if you go into Facebook, you can search One Step Outside and be able to find it easily, or click the links in the show notes to find it there as well. So a couple of questions I'd like to ask you that I like to ask all of our guests that are on. And by the way, and thank you so much for being part of the podcast and coming on today, because I think a lot of the things you talked about are 100% fears and gurgles that underneath everything that keep people paralyzed and not making a change in their life. So thank you for being here and sharing all that.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I could talk to you all day.
So tell us, what's maybe one book or blog that you're reading these days that's either inspiring you or maybe poking holes and challenging you a bit in your belief system?
Oh, it's a great question. I was actually thinking now of a book based on what we were talking about that inspired me way back when I started, which I think I'd like to go back to, because it's Chris Guillebeau's The Art of Nonconformity. And, we talked about this kind of conveyor belt and the standard kind of school, university job. And he has such a different background to me. He didn't go to university. He started out his business by actually just traveling to every country in the world, which really inspired me at the beginning of the journey, and just began to sort of question, in my mind, this definition of success. So I think that's a really good start. And he's actually written 3 or 4 other books since about side hustles and $100 startup and The Quest, I think there's something about as well. And I've read them all. So Chris Guillebeau is definitely a great place to start if you're beginning that journey like me as well.
Yeah, that is an excellent book recommendation. And I've read the $100 startup one, and then he's just a fascinating writer. So great recommendation. Are there any apps, maybe one app that you're using right now that's helping you simplify in your life, either with your work or just personally?
So actually, their app is not very good, but their desktop version is very good. It's Toggl. So Toggl. I always give that as a tip, because the first step in finding time, because we haven't talked about that today, but apart from money and fears and things, one of the biggest barriers is I just don't have time. I've got a full-time job, family, hobbies, gym, etc. And actually just beginning to track your time. And again, certainly if you're already in your business, you'll realize how much time you're spending on social media, maybe on Netflix, all these things, and you will find time. You'll be surprised how little work you're actually doing. Employees are spending maybe 3 hours of the day doing productive work. So it's an interesting, challenge to yourself to just map out what you're actually spending your time on now. And you might be surprised. You might be able to find some new time there. So Toggl, Toggl.
Yes, we use Toggl here at the Simplifiers. It is brilliant. And literally, if it scares the bejesus out of you to do time tracking, do it for one day. Just, sign up for their little free trial and just do it one day and see what that's like. It is mind-blowing when you realize, oh my God, I spent so much time doing that. You just have no clue until you start tracking. So, Anna, is there one person in your network or a friend circle or colleagues that you think we should interview on the Simplifiers podcast, and why?
Yeah, so I used to, at the beginning of the journey, I was listening to everybody. I was following everybody. I was subscribed to everyone. And I've gone through a phase now when I've sort of shut out the noise. I focused only on my coach and what I'm doing. And I think you haven't had her on yet. So it's Kelly Roach.
No, not yet. Mm-mm.
Great, because she has been, a lifesaver for me this year and really stepping some things up for me, helping me with being consistent, supporting me as well with getting the book and so on. She's just published a book on the same day called Bigger Than You. And her message is all around now building a team. And it may sound like, a team, I'm a solopreneur, that's not something for me. But really, it's everybody from the beginning, whether you start outsourcing a few hours a week. I've done this year for the first time, getting marketing support, admin, accountancy, and so on. But really, ultimately, building a thriving team around you that's going to drive you to much bigger success without burning yourself out and compromising on, your health and your relationships and so on. So Kelly Roach, I think, would be a great simplifier for you in terms of building a team.
Yeah, their name has come up, but we've not had her on there yet. So definitely we'll reach out to her to get her on the podcast soon. So gratitude and simplicity, in my mind, go hand in hand. Tell us what's one thing you're grateful for right now in your life.
I think about this a lot. I am so grateful, I have to say, for my health and wellness in general. It's something I nurture. There's only so much you can do yourself, but it's something I'm very aware of thanks to, things happening around me and so on. My family, my friends, my partner, and also the fact that I'm even in a place in the world, in a time where I'm allowed to ask these questions, be, so philosophical that I can be at the top of Maslow's pyramid and really ask myself, what does success look like for me? So I'm eternally grateful that I have the opportunity to do everything I'm doing right now.
Yeah. And don't forget, you guys can listen to Anna on her own podcast, which is Reimagining Success. So make sure to search for that in Apple Podcasts and everywhere you get your podcasts, and you can hear more from her as well. So my last question for you today, Anna, is this. Somebody's been listening to this episode today and feeling inspired. They're like, you know what? I am done with this cubicle farm. I am done with this life that I'm in right now, where I'm stuck at. But they're a little bit scared. If there is one thing you could whisper into her ear right now just to encourage her, what would you say to her now?
Oh, that's a great question. I was thinking about the one thing. I mean, my brand is called One Step Outside, and it's from the quote, everything you've ever wanted is one step outside your comfort zone. So I'd really encourage her to take that one step. And it can be anything. If you've wanted to be a writer always, you've dreamt of that, sit down and write. If you've been meaning to play more piano, sit down and play some piano. If you've wanted to learn a language, download an app and sit down and do 10 minutes. Send an email to someone, research a course, give someone a call. Just find one thing, again, especially if it's, something you've been really thinking about for a long time and not doing it about. If you take a little step every day, you'll build your confidence, you'll make massive progress. And before you know it, you'll be much further along than you ever thought was possible.
Anna, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. Such a pleasure.